Dear Andrew, my name is Raph, and I'm the host of the Forest Creek podcast. With me is my co-host,
Jarrod Regan.
And we just came back, or rather came back about an hour ago or so, from the Vogue Theater in Vancouver. I will say feeder. Isn't that weird?
It is weird.
Feeder. It's like a...
It's feeding us?
No, I mean like it's a speech dyslexia or something like that. Speech impediment.
Now we know you have a speech dyslexia.
Which is hilarious, because I'm the host of a podcast. But we just came back from the Vogue Theater, where you were... What's the word? Premiering? He's not really premiering. I feel like he's
touring.
Done this.
It's a tour, yeah.
He's been touring his... Rather, we're speaking to him, so I'll say you were touring your new movie, which at the time that we'd purchased our tickets was untitled. Untitled Andrew Callaghan podcast. I almost said podcast. Untitled Andrew Callaghan movie, which you revealed to us the name is Dear Kelly. First off, I want to say that we were entertained by the movie itself. Along with the rest of the audience, it had moments of laughter. It had moments of unexpected endearment. You know, those kind of hit. And overall, I thought it was a really smart, interesting, cool project. The thesis, for those listening, is basically humanizing. Taking somebody that we would normally think of as, like I've been saying, a lowest common denominator, a kind of unintelligible figure, something that people brush off as annoying. Even people, if you side with the politics of Kelly, the main character of our documentary that we just watched, you might still be annoyed by this guy. I know I am. I might even share some views with Kelly, but it feels embarrassing to admit that after seeing someone like that debuted across the screen. But the project itself, Dear Kelly, was fascinating. It was humanizing about that. The movie basically takes someone, Kelly, who is to say pro-Trump does not feel adequate. It doesn't feel adequate to say this guy's a MAGA supporter. Even though that's what a lot of people would be quick to categorize him as. I want to say, I think it was best put by Patriot, capital P, when they were describing what he was. I think Patriot, capital P, is a very interesting way to explain it, because I feel like these people have been present throughout all of American history. And in particular, when it comes to the Trump movement, there's a lot of capital P patriots there, and there are people who don't even really go for Trump. Like, Trump would feel uncomfortable in a room with these people, I feel like. Because it's a lot of vitriol, it's a lot of righteousness, it's a lot of very conservative, traditionalist points, often backed up by a lot of very forward Christianism, but not even in a way that would make other Christians comfortable with them in a church. It's like this person could speak at a podium for 5 minutes. But as soon as we got to minute 6, we're going to hear some stuff that's going to make people look at each other and be like, what? Are we still donating to this place? And you took such an unlikable character, especially in the way that he was presented to us as being, you know, not rioting, but loudly and annoyingly protesting outside of a Planned Parenthood. In a way that would make even people who agreed with him, like I'm saying, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And showing this guy to be even sweet at times, kind of like a sweet, lovable guy at times, and walking us through his history and how he ultimately got there, and really humanizing this trouble. I thought that the thesis was very smart, the way that he broke it down to say that security, significance, connection.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Very smart way.
The people, what makes somebody like Kelly is losing these 3 things that everybody need, which is a sense of security, a sense of significance, and it's not with the C. Connection. Yeah. So ultimately, I thought this was a really intriguing documentary. We have our notes about the quality of it. There's a lot of nuance that goes into it. And we're going to break that all down here on the Forest Creek podcast after just having watched it. But just to get, impressions right off the first hand, Jarrod, what was your impression of like the experience of going to see this show? Do you mean the theater and the way they did everything around that we were talking about, or do you mean actually the whole experience, including the movie itself?
Let me walk us back then.
Yeah.
And be like, a few months ago,
you seemed interested and excited about this project.
Yeah.
I had never heard of anything. I feel like I've heard...
I think that's the funniest thing, that you've never heard of this guy. Even when I said it's the all gas, no brakes guy,
Yeah.
it didn't click with you. You're like, huh? The who?
I'm in like a different circle of alternative media than this guy. I have heard of where he comes from, and like having done some research, I can draw some connections to him now that like I understand what his place is in all this. I've heard you mention all gas, no brakes a few times, but it never really clicked for me. I've heard of Channel 5 News peripherally, but I've never actually watched it. A lot of man on the street type of interviews, to me, I tend to turn away from them because it does reach out to like the people that I'm going to refer to as lowest common denominators. Because it's like I often hear when people talk about polling that polling is the dumbest way to read any kind of metric at all whatsoever. Because who's dumb enough to answer a poll? How bored do you have to be? What kind of person do you have to be to answer a poll, right? And so that can't be providing me something accurate. Same thing with man on the street stuff. When you go to a march or a rally or a protest, you're getting the loudest, often the most unintelligible people talking to you about the points. It's not a place for academic or intellectual discussion. It's not a place for making connections, really, and forming that. It's a place where you can feel like you fit into something, or that you're a part of something bigger when you march alongside the rest of the army.
Like you mentioned, it's something, it gives you a community, something everybody agrees on regardless of your backstory or background or anything.
I often, and I love to pretend sometimes that politics is just sports. You're watching it like waiting for your team to win.
I'm red team, you're blue team.
Literally, it's funny, here in Canada those teams are reversed.
I know, it messed me up the longest time because watching American politics, I was like, oh, red is conservative, blue is liberal. And then I started seeing the Conservative Party in Canada like show their big blue flag. I was like, wait, what?
It's funny, it's like the old way of talking about it is that if you are a prince or if you're a royalty, you're a blue blood.
Oh.
The difference being is that when your blood is in your body, it's blue. That's why your veins are like green.
Yeah.
But then when it exits your body and interacts with the light coming from outside, it turns red. So you're red because you're out there working hard, dying for your country. You bleed red. Or you're a blue blood because you're posh and you never shed your blood. Yeah. Right? Whereas it gets flipped when you're in the States because red is the Republican color. So, and they often consider those to be the more... I think the Republicans have often been portrayed as like very rich. I don't think that's like across the board true. Because obviously a lot of Democrats are rich too. But they go the red-blooded American. Are you a red Republican? And it makes a little bit more sense. R&R, right? Here in Canada, it's the opposite. But not to dwell on that. So you introduced this guy. You said that we should get tickets and watch this thing.
Yeah.
I was skeptical. So I did 2 minutes of obligatory research. And I saw Andrew Callaghan as a gonzo journalist. And we saw a trailer for his movie. At least I watched the trailer, and it looked like a documentary about the January 6th incident at the Capitol in the U.S., which we'll get into.
You saw more than I did.
I just watched the trailer.
Yeah, I saw his little advertisements with some guy in a mask going we dug this thing out of the desert after this many years.
I feel like I didn't see that at all.
Because I saw that thing, and that was where I was like, we got to get these tickets.
The thing in the desert after this many years? What was that anyway? I don't even remember.
It was just a little advertising thing.
Oh,
him, essentially telling people, hey, I'm releasing a movie.
Yeah. And it seemed interesting. So I guess we were interested in it for different reasons, but you got the tickets.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I put it in my calendar. And then I only started really looking him up when we were sitting in the theater waiting for the show to start.
Yeah, that was amazing. You pop up ChatGPT and go, explain exactly the situation of being in the theater. I'm going to review this after, and I have no clue who this guy is. What do I need to know?
Yeah, and I mentioned a couple things, tell me about his controversies, tell me about his appearance on January 6th. What's his association?
Yeah.
Is this guy a leftist, the internet's accusing him of being? What is going on? And it gave me a pretty good run through.
Yeah.
So I'll dial back a little bit further and talk about Andrew Callaghan is what we call a gonzo journalist. Gonzo journalism was popularized by Hunter S. Thompson, who was a prolific writer and a prolific journalist of his time. He was famous for you can read the book now. It's Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 76. And what Hunter Thompson did, he used to work for Rolling Stone, and he was when you read his writing, it's very good. It's very fluid and very poetic. But gonzo journalism, the style that he founded, was based off of subjective experience, not objective truth. So journalism, traditionally, we're reporting objective facts. We're reading statistics, we're showing you the thing, here is what the guy actually said. Subjective reporting is basically telling you what the feeling was of being there, describing what these things were behaving like. And Hunter S. Thompson, the other thing he was very famous of was doing a lot of drugs. So he would drop acid and follow Nixon on the campaign trail. And then he would describe these Republicans as pigs and tell you about the witches and whatever's going on, and like tell you about the evil that was in the air, and describe the experience of, melting through the, the thing, and being at the bar and, talking shit with all of the other journalists who were covering the thing. And he's saying like that, he would admit to you that is where most of his stories and where his things came from. It was not listening to the candidates themselves. It was just chilling around the area, right?
Yeah.
In a way, that's what Andrew Callaghan has also done. Quite literally, what his previous movie, I don't remember what the title of it, but it was with HBO Max, and he did basically a man-on-the-street style version of that, where he would follow around Trump's campaign trail and interview people who were there. He has received some criticism about this. Like, I feel like it's not a very good piece of criticism, but a lot of the time people get upset when they see Republicans or people who are conservative expressing conservative viewpoints. They go, why are you platforming these people?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I can kind of, if you were going to stand on that hill, I get where you would be coming from, because Andrew's version of it is a little bit difficult to deal with, because he's literally going to, like I'm saying, the dumbest people. I might even, me and some of these people, I'm going to, to be forthright, I'm like somewhat conservative, libertarian, kind of leaning myself. On a bad day, anarcho-capitalism. So watch yourself. Now I'm gonna. But like, I would be embarrassed to be around at the Capitol riot that was happening. I would not have showed up. I wouldn't have showed up to the trucker protest here in Canada. Doesn't matter if I agree with these people or not. I think being in the street is dumb, because all the best stuff happens off the street, and all the worst stuff happens on the street. It doesn't work a lot of the time. Like, I get demonstration and stuff like that. We can have an intellectual discussion about it. But like, again, if I wanted to find the dumbest people in my movement, I would just go to the street.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that makes Andrew Callaghan a lot different from other people that do these sorts of interviews. Because street interviews are crazy popular these days. But what actually was surprising and nice about this movie is that it definitely was an Andrew Callaghan movie, in that it found one random weird guy at some rally or protest.
Yeah.
And then it was a huge deep dive into him, his life, his family, everything he's been through, and what he's doing now and where he's going.
Which was a really interesting thesis.
Yeah, and he's done a lot of those on, like, just random people on the street. Like we saw in the movie, he popped in clips of Crip Mac, which is a guy hugely popular. He's done like 2 or so episodes, like 20, 30 minutes.
African gentleman with the tattoo on his face and a big blue shirt to tell you he is a Crip.
Yeah, that's his whole thing. It's like he's that's a whole other thing. But it's like, that's Andrew Callaghan's biggest, essentially, shtick isn't the right word, but that's what makes it a him thing, is that he chooses one like strange individual that most people would ignore or just blow off and say, you're some moron, who cares? Yeah. And then he deep dives and humanizes them.
Yeah, which is different from like Jimmy Kimmel had a bit on his show where they would do man on the street interviews and then pop them up, or even on like CNN and stuff like that, they would do man on the street interviews, and they would literally, it's the thing that news is most criticized for doing nowadays, which is instead of showing you the whole thing, we're just clipping it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? We're just clipping it to show you how crazy this guy is. We don't actually care where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Right? And that gives you like a really poor idea of who people are.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why Joe Rogan is so famous, because he does the opposite.
Yeah.
Instead of going and finding the man on the street, he brings him and makes him the man at the table who sits down for a discussion for 2 hours over a cigar and scotch or something. It's like, it's the exact opposite, right? So gonzo journalism does that subjective reporting. It tells you the feeling of the thing. And if anything, the man on the street style in the frame of gonzo journalism works best when you're doing what Andrew's doing, because you're actually going there and getting the full feel. Yeah. If you get anything less, you've been lied to.
Yeah, and that's where I found the editing in terms of story and how he presented Kelly as a character was very well done.
Yeah.
Starting off with the harsh pro-life protesting, like a
Yes.
3-man protest outside of this place.
Yeah.
What you're like, this guy's freaking wild.
Outside of a plan, and we're watching him go into the Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, and scream
yell
about
at
buying parts.
buying parts of hey, aborted children. And this is where it first came into my mind, like where I started thinking about this lowest common denominator thing, because I'm watching Kelly go in there and say, "Are you guys selling the baby parts?
Yeah.
Give me a list of the baby parts and how much each one costs."
Yeah.
That's stupid. That's a stupid way to present what you're talking about. What you could actually demonstrate is, hey, when people are aborting children, sometimes they make a deal with the parents of the aborted child to be able to harvest organs and usable tissues or materials from the aborted child in order to, save another baby's life or produce stem cells or get organic matter they can use in other medical treatments. Does that have an intelligible core? Is there something we could argue about and discuss intellectually and philosophically and determine how we feel about it morally? Yes. But we don't get there when we're yelling in a Planned Parenthood about baby parts.
Yeah.
Which is automatic.
Especially to the guy working the counter.
Yeah. Ultimately, what someone like Kelly does is a disservice to what people are trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I would argue that for the people, the last place that you should be protesting Planned Parenthood is actually at Planned Parenthood. In that way of thinking about it, right? It's interesting, actually, when we saw Andrew goes from that scene to open up why he's doing this movie.
Yeah.
And he starts by talking about his last movie, where he was so running around so much, trying to follow the campaign trail and talk to all these people that he didn't actually get time to spend with the...
Exactly. He couldn't do the Andrew Callaghan thing of deep diving on a single person.
Yeah. Actually, something just occurred to me right now is Crip Mac.
Yeah.
It kind of... There's a parallel there between that and Hunter S. Thompson famously spending a couple years with the Hells Angels.
Oh, no way.
To report on them. Yeah, he wrote the book on the Hells Angels.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was pretty... if there was anybody who could do it, it would be Hunter S. Thompson. Because it's just being able to embed yourself with people who are that off the edge in some way. But, in the same way Thompson reported on the fringes of society, Andrew comes down and he reports on the fringes of politics.
Yeah.
So the movie takes us from Kelly as this guy on the street, and the opening lines of it are talking about Bill Joyner. Is that his name?
Bill Joyner.
Joyner.
Yeah.
Bill Joyner. He starts off by talking about Bill Joyner, how Bill Joyner ruined his life, and he's telling that. And then we couldn't quite hear it because the audience was still quieting down to watch the movie.
Yeah.
In the beginning. And then it goes from there to the Planned Parenthood scene, which is hard to watch a little bit. But then
literally in the first 3 minutes, everyone was going, "Oh!" because it's like some car rolls up and they talk about how they're going to try and go over there and convince them not to have an abortion.
That's going to be...
Everybody went, "Oh!"
Yeah, man. That's not the way, dog.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't
man.
know about that. Yeah. But you go from there. Andrew explains, I'm making this movie because I didn't get a chance to really follow up with the people that I got the chance to, and he fixates on one guy. The story starts with Andrew goes to this White Lives Matter demonstration that's supposed to happen.
Oh, yes. That was so funny.
So I want to back up and be like, America is going through some stuff right now. I think a lot of people like to famously talk about how it's the end of an empire. We're in book this of the fall of the Roman Empire, and we're following the same parallels. And you look at our culture and the way we're expressing decadency and, bending the nature of sexuality or whatever, and then how these things are the same as it was with the fall of Rome. Sure. However you want to phrase it, America's going through some stuff. Right now it's an election year. We just watched Donald Trump debate a corpse. And they argued about their golf swing. To nobody. There wasn't a crowd.
10 out of 10.
It was on CNN. They were just standing there. I can't imagine what it would have been like. Because the journalists on CNN, it didn't feel like they were, being as biased as they normally would be. They were standing there, actually doing a pretty good job of being neutral. And I cannot imagine how uncomfortable it would be to watch them be like Biden, rambles through a couple minutes and then goes to, "We beat Medicare." What? You beat it?
That was so weird.
And then Trump gets on and be like, you beat it to death.
It's like, I don't know what the facts are in this, but like just looking at the rhetoric, not to dwell on that, but yeah, it's a very contentious time for U.S. politics, and that means it's a very contentious time for the world's politics. There's a lot of the world's economy relies on the U.S., and even in the antithesis of that, BRICS nations, for instance, who are banding together to get off the U.S. dollar and get off U.S. hegemony, off of U.S. hegemony.
Hegemony?
Hegemony. Hegemony.
Money?
Quite literally. To get off of the US dollar, they are still doing so as an antagonist to the US in that way. So it's a contentious time for everybody, and I feel like, to me, I'm excited because this feels like we're about to start the new season of my sports league. I'm like, bet. Watching, it's funny, more accurate than polling is betting. To look at Vegas odds on who's going to win the president, those are more accurate.
Anyways, the Andrew Callaghan movie, Dear Kelly.
So it's a contentious time in the U.S., and we've seen it even especially around the 2020 era, when COVID had struck and we had the rise of what I will loosely term the anti-vax movement, because I don't like the terms that people stick onto this stuff. And Andrew's like, I hate the term conspiracy theorist.
Yeah. That was a good preface. He's like, I'm avoiding these terms because they come with these things and mean these things. Yeah.
Yeah, there is this thing that happens where, like, even the intellectual versions of saying all these things, we don't trust the intellectuals anymore.
Yeah.
Because the intellectuals have been proven to have lied to us on a number of accounts. And then everybody who phrases things in the politically correct way also lies all the time. They have weapons of mass destruction. Just a fun little aside, the term conspiracy theorist itself was coined by the CIA to discredit people who were criticizing the CIA.
Yeah.
So we have to take everything with a grain of salt. But we watch Andrew fixate on one guy who shows up in this White Lives Matter protest.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the funniest thing, is that he didn't show up for a White Lives Matter protest. The White Lives Matter protest was scheduled to happen, and then a counter protest showed up 3 hours earlier. And then Kelly heard that there were all these Antifa Black Lives Matter people there, so he went to protest them.
Yeah, I found it.
He was shocked to find out it was supposed to be a White Lives Matter rally.
And then Andrew's walking around, is like, the only one Republican who was there seemed confused about what was going on.
The guy with the blue fedora.
He's like, why do you wear blue? It's like, this is a relaxing, calming color.
That was so good. The only Republican seemed confused.
It's funny, one big thing that goes on about all these is that they say that a lot of these actual protests and their pages that come up in these organizations, they're started by Russian and Chinese bots. And Russian and Chinese, like, agents, and they get together, they form these troll farms, and they start protests. They'll have, like, here's a pro-Palestinian protest right across the street from a pro-Israel protest, so that these people deliberately clash and create more discord in America. So it's very likely that one of those groups is who started the White Lives Matter thing. And obviously the counter-protesters show up early, and then it's just a bunch of people, yelling, I'm going to use my white body to defend the...
Yeah.
Sure. All right, bro. Do whatever. But then Kelly is the only guy who shows up as the counter-protester.
Yeah.
And the image we get of him is he's carrying 4 flags at the same time.
Well, it's called a four-banger.
The four-banger. The 2 flags I can point out, right? Well, like, obviously there was a U.S. flag.
Yeah.
There was also a Blue Lives flag.
There was a Trump flag.
Yeah, a Trump flag, and a thin blue line flag, and then a Gadsden flag.
What flag?
So I'll go through them, right? Because we know what a Trump is.
Yeah.
We know what the American flag is. The thin blue line flag is when you see the black on white U.S. flag with a blue strip across it, and that's supposed to say that this blue strip is the police. They're the blue line that keeps America in order, and they're the line between you and, all sorts of other shenanigans. I was losing the train of thought because, honestly, it's the police debates are one of the most mentally tiring things about that. But they came up with the 2020 times when people were like, at a time of defund the police. So no, maybe we should have police. Blah 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 blah.
Anyways, thin blue line is the cops.
Thin blue line. The other one was the Gadsden flag, which is kind of a cool.
Gadsden?
Yeah, it's called the Gadsden flag. It's a yellow flag with a snake and.
Is that the Don't Tread on Me?
Yeah, the Don't Tread on Me flag. I used to have a T-shirt that I used as part of pajamas that was a play on it. it said no step on Sneck. I had like a little
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. It was a Tim Pool shirt, actually. He's a great reporter.
That's so good.
No step on Sneck. So he shows up with these a four-banger. I think the four-banger we saw later, it was basically
That was
like
the huge extendable pole that had all 4 flags attached to one pole.
Yeah. And then, so Kelly goes into this thing. He's talking a little bit with Andrew about God knows what. Like I said, it's very unintelligible. But he quickly gets into this conspiracy theory where he's like, they assassinated Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
Because Kobe Bryant was about to reveal things about the Clintons. It's interesting to me about Kobe Bryant is that like after he died, he just became a saint. Very much instantly. It's like, I get it. I'm not into NBA, but like, well, beloved athlete has died, I get it. But it's like, it's very funny how like elevated he has become. But it's a conspiracy theory. Oh, helicopters weren't supposed to be flying this way on that day, and he ended up in a crash that killed him when he was just about to reveal things about the Clintons and how they're eating children and blah blah blah. And then he points out, he's like, Kelly's thing is like Black Lives Matter showed up. Black Lives Matter is not my real enemy. My real enemy is Antifa.
Yeah.
Antifa being anti-fascist, who are hilariously named anti-fascist because their thing is to beat people up who don't disagree with them. They actually behave in a very tyrannical and fascist manner. And it's interesting. It's clever. Both these organizations name themselves Black Lives Matter or anti-fascist, so that when you criticize them, they can then say that you are the thing they're fighting against.
Yeah.
So, in the case of Antifa, they'd be like, you are the fascists. Fascist lives don't matter. Racist lives don't matter. And they can blatantly stand up because what do you say? Racist lives do matter? Well, according to the criminal code in the U.S., yes, they do. We have a thing called due process. You're not allowed to just murder people because you perceive them for a crime. They actually have to be guilty of a thing. And whether or not you are racist, you're kind of allowed to believe what you believe so long as you don't actually hurt anybody. That's kind of what criminal codes are about. Otherwise, we could just call everybody you don't like a file and kill them. Not to
You're gonna
get
get locked up after this.
Again, we're going off on tangents, but, well, you know, if you call me up, I'll call you. Hey,
You'll claim to be underage.
every negative comments on this podcast, on this YouTube video, I'm gonna respond with the PDF with the PDF file allegation.
The PDF. Signed by 3 lawyers.
So Kelly shows up to this thing. He immediately starts going after them. He's not really talking much, but like they see him and they see that they have a nemesis.
Yeah, that was the sucky thing I think for Kelly, is that he barely had any idea what was going on. He just didn't like the group that was there, and they all thought he was now the face of White Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he wasn't here for that.
As the kids would say, he did not understand the assignment.
Yeah.
But then, here's the thing. He gets his chance to speak, and his first thing he says is, they assassinated Kobe Bryant. A head wound, a stolen hat, and 2 stolen flags later, they have chased Kelly away from...
Yeah, they stole his hat, and somebody said, nobody cares about your hat.
Yeah, they hit him, they stole his flags.
And then he got arrested.
That was a different thing. So he
I
did
thought
get
that
arrested.
was the same thing.
That was a different story.
Oh, that was where he had the 4-bang.
Yeah, that's where he...
I love that term.
I'm gonna show up to your house with a 4-banger. And that's where, you know, he's talking to Andrew and he's explaining his views and stuff, and then he goes off about Bill Joyner.
Yeah.
And this is what piques Andrew's interest. So we go into this. Bill Joyner, when we're later talking to Kelly, we discover that Bill Joyner is long story short, Bill Joyner was like a predatory loan guy who offered Kelly a predatory loan, and Kelly ended up burying himself with this predatory loan, and he lost his house, and he blames his entire life situation on that. And this is where Andrew's thesis comes in. He says that Kelly went through a major tragedy, like many people in the U.S. do.
Yeah.
It was pointed out that happened to him around the 2008-2010 time, where there's a major economic and financial crisis in the U.S., and a lot of people fell victim to the same thing. And Kelly lost his house, and not having a house makes things very difficult at home, and obviously you lose your family and blah, blah, blah. And then when you're in the darkness, QAnon becomes your light. These political extremism becomes your light. A thing that occurred to both of us is the Jordan Peterson methodology of clean your room.
Oh, yeah, because that was a big idea behind that is revealed later in the movie with Kelly's essentially thought process between going full right-wing counter-protest to the protesters is that he wanted to clean up the country so that there could be a country to have his family in, and then he could clean up his family.
Yeah.
And get that sorted out. But it's like, if you can't even sort out your own family, how the heck are you going to sort out a country?
Which is a criticism that Jordan was originally making actually about a lot of people on the left. If
Yeah.
you see a lot of people on the left, they're depressed, they're on several medications, they're
Yeah.
overweight, they're questioning their identities, they're unhappy at home, they're unhappy with their families, they can't find spouses. Problem on top of problem on top of problem.
Yeah.
Who is there to blame in this world? And then Donald Trump takes the podium.
Yeah.
And he becomes the perfect target. And it's not like he isn't good at being the target.
Well, it's the exact same thing in the opposite, because that's where we have the entire story of Kelly. It's like
Yeah.
you've got the stolen election and this and that. He's like, wow,
Right.
the country's corrupt. We're going this way. We have to go the other way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People fall into political extremism when their lives are tragic.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, in a way, there's been like documentaries and stories about this from the views of terrorists, like actual terrorists in the Middle East, about what happens to them, right? The terrorist isn't fighting because the Quran told him to annihilate the white people from the world, whatever, right? He's fighting because a bomb hit his house and killed his family and destroyed his livelihood. And then who came along? It was the black flag of ISIS and say, join us, brother. Clearly, it's not only, it was like, yes, it's in the Quran. It told us that we're going to have to fight this fight, and here is your proof of it.
Yeah.
They just killed your family.
But they've already got the motivation.
Yeah. And it's almost like you look at someone like that and be like, oh, I see why he's fighting.
Yeah.
It's very hard to piece that together in the kind of ideological warfare that goes on in the West.
Yeah.
Of most of your warfare is done on Facebook, you know, and then from Facebook it erupts into something else. So Kelly is in the situation where, and it's humanizing to the point where Andrew becomes a family friend, in that he goes and meets Kelly's like kids.
Yeah, that blew my mind that at some point it comes around, he's been involved with this family for over 2 years. That was wild.
Yeah. Well, like over the period of time, like clearly there was an investment
Yeah.
in this happening. We
Yeah,
really
he was
follow
constantly
the
talking to
story.
him. It's like Kelly started becoming friends with Andrew and whatnot. And then, yeah, that was freaking wild.
Yeah.
And then he gets involved with the entire family, starts interviewing all of them.
There's a, yeah, and
He goes to a party with his son.
so it's interesting if we're characterizing them like his son is kind of willing to entertain his dad, but then it's interesting how the relationship has evolved where his son is seeing how irresponsible his dad has become to
Yeah.
the point where the son is now becoming the father.
Yeah, because he feels like he's got to do some damage control. Like, hey, maybe calm down a bit.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting because he sees, like, this is just a thing he's passionate about, so he wants to connect with his dad.
In America, and you know, like a lot of, well, actually here too, really, but we have this thing about like your parents are conservatives and they follow the old traditional way and they're kind of off their kilter because they were from an older time.
Yeah.
And they're not intellectually or morally sound, but you are because you went to college. And that's a little bit of what his daughter seems to put off, despite the fact that, you know, she actually does appear to be a very reasonable, intelligent person.
Yeah.
But his daughter's thing is that she came out of the closet while she was in college, and that's
Yeah.
obviously a thing that a lot of conservatives are not on board with. It doesn't seem like Kelly himself is homophobic, except in the ways that are political.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like you find a lot of people on the right who are often like, they're not outrightly homophobic, they're just against intersectionality and the academization and the whole, like, the crazy rainbow coalition and alphabet mafia type of world. They don't actually have a problem with people being gay. They have a problem with the things around that, right? So it's like even when you see like Kelly like responding to his daughter coming out to him as bi, he like just cracks a joke about it. He doesn't seem to understand it. Like he just makes a joke. It doesn't click very much to him.
I don't agree entirely, because even then later on in the film you see it's like he told her she's going to hell for being gay
While
and
asking
then,
for money, it was really
yeah,
funny,
and then said he's not going, if she ever marries a woman, he's not going to that wedding.
Now, here's the thing. I'm going to blame that on Charlie Kirk. We're going to get to him. But to kind of follow the way, one thing that really struck me is when we started to watch his home movies.
Yeah, man.
When we started seeing snippets of Kelly's
man.
home movies and just him being a dad with his kids.
Yeah.
It's sweet. I don't know how else to describe it. It's a sweet thing to
No,
watch.
Andrew puts it perfectly. It's like he's like the classic Western dad.
Yeah, if we were to tell the story, it's like he's a guy who grew up in a mobile home. His parents were particularly rich, and then he worked hard. He played football in high school. He went to South California, went to college, studied hard, became a lawyer. Started his own agency. It's like, that's the American dream.
Yeah.
And then like he made enough money, married a beautiful woman, lives in a house, has a beautiful family. Life is going great.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't all great, because what later gets revealed to us is that Kelly kind of fell for the consumerist America trap, or we can just live on credit.
Yeah.
And it was like the rich people's version of living paycheck to paycheck, where he couldn't actually afford all these renovations he was doing to the house. He was just dealing with it.
Yeah.
It goes. And then it turns out that, like, you know, when you live like that, you become kind of greedy. I live like that a little bit. And it makes me greedy. I go like, oh, I'd like this watch. You know, I go out of my way, even though it's not necessarily the most responsible thing. But, you know, you fall into this trap of, I got the credit. You know, that's not the same as having money in the bank. That's just having leeway, right? So you think you have financial leeway and you go spending it everywhere, and you fall into this hole because, you know, there comes a reckoning.
Yeah.
And it makes you greedy at some points, because you think you have this leeway, and then you get in your mind, I just need ways to widen the leeway so I can get more nice things. And that's what Kelly starts to do. He starts to act unethically as a lawyer. And eventually it turns out he gets himself disbarred. So that cuts off his income.
Yeah.
It kind of ruins the career he had going for, as he said, more than 25 years, almost 30. And now he has to support a family and trying to save his house. And then a predatory loan comes along from a guy named Bill Joyner.
You can do it. You did it.
I did it. I remember the name of Bill Joyner. And then Bill...
Not Willie Joyner, or was it Wally Joyner?
Bill Joyner. That's me. I'm Bill Joyner.
This is the big reveal.
It was me. So then he falls into this predatory loan, and like, again, many Americans during that time, enters into another layer of financial crisis, which ends in him losing his home. And that's kind of like a straw in his, like, competence. It was like the last straw broke. You're not a lawyer anymore. You can't provide. You don't own a house anymore. You can't keep everything together. I don't understand where the 47 animals comes into this, but apparently at the same time he was also dealing with the fact that his mom had passed away.
Yes, yeah.
At the time, which only comes up later in the thing. But like, you can see how mental thing upon mental thing upon mental thing is falling into this way. And then we find out, and this was mentioned peripherally, that like Kelly was already kind of an eccentric before, and he seemed like an eccentric.
Yeah.
I've met guys like him who are like a million miles a minute. But on top of that, we find that he's actually like a huge stoner.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a mind-blowing plot twist that was just kind of slotted in there.
It was kind of slotted.
There were a lot of those in this movie.
His daughter outright said like he was high all the time.
Yeah, but then it's like before...
We thought that was like an energy thing.
Yeah, I feel it's such a funny thing with this movie, in that throughout the movie there are tiny little things that are little like massive plot twists that are just kind of slotted in. Just, oh, by the way, yeah, this. Oh yeah, huge stoner, massive stoner, his entire life. Oh yeah,
full time.
Terrible actions here, here, and here.
So
and there's just little bits and pieces.
And if we're gonna talk about that chemically, like, again, weed is a thing. Cannabis is a thing that.
Yeah, weed is a thing.
Weed is indeed a thing, and it's a thing that floods your brain with dopamine whenever you use it. So if you are a person without a regular uptake of dopamine, you're gonna have a hard time not using that divisively.
Yeah.
Right? People always say weed is not addictive. Dopamine is addictive. We just have to like rest on that. If you're a person who is unhappy and there's a lot of things making you unhappy, and then you start smoking weed, you're getting a dopamine hit that's not supposed to be there. And then it's easy for you to become reliant on that as your source of happiness. It's the thing that gives you relief. It also induces paranoia, because it taps into your parts of your brain you don't normally go, and you start thinking about things. You become hyper aware of things that you're not normally aware of.
Yeah.
It kind of warps your sense of reality a little bit. And if you are someone who is, you know, at that time in America around the 20 to 25 2004 era where we are now, which is still crazy. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening in politics, so if you're high and you're on the internet, or high and on Facebook, and you go down a few rabbit holes, and some of those rabbit holes, let's face it, they're kind of entertaining. But you go down after one meme after another, and then you're listening to Charlie Kirk on Turning Point USA, and it's starting to bend your mind a little bit, and you're like, they're taking over. And it's not like mainstream society doesn't do things that kind of push you over the edge, because the mainstream has figured out ways to integrate liberal politics in a way that's like normal. It's normal to see people be like, end racism on their thing, on a corporation that has nothing to do with that. Like, where, like, a great example, Kylie Jenner or Kendall Jenner, one of those two girls, did a Coca-Cola commercial where she walks through the line of the protest to offer the cops up a Coke.
What the heck?
What is going on? Is Coca-Cola bringing people together that way?
Coca-Cola bridges the gap.
Bridges the gap. I think that was their intent. But that, again, that's the point, is like,
That's
we're seeing...
so good.
I'm watching Drive to Survive, the F1 documentary on Netflix, and they do stuff like that all the time. Every time they pivot over to my favorite driver, Lando Norris, they have on his wheel, it says "End Racism" on it, right above the L Norris. His name.
Yeah.
They don't have it there anymore, but like they had it there for a long time as part of like the 2020s thing for a while, and they even still do promotions like that. It's like, it has nothing to do with racism.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the popular thing at the time.
Exactly. We're just leaning on it to get points, and there's DEI and ESG metrics within corporations that.
What is ESG?
Equity, social, government, something like that. Environmental, social.
Government.
Environmental, social, something else.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be metrics for like how much are you helping people who are peripherally involved in your corporation. Is your corporation making the world a better place on these metrics?
Yeah.
Is diversity, equity, inclusion part of your thing? And if it's not, well, your stock is going to drop and you're not going to be able to get loans and operate your corporation the normal way. So, there's these metrics people have to fulfill, and then suddenly that's weaved its way into our culture. And then if you are someone who doesn't side with liberal politics and you see that going on in the mainstream, it feels like the mainstream, the norm of things are encroaching on you, right? So it's not like there isn't material for you to become paranoid about if you're smoking weed that often. And then if you're always high and that's your only source of happiness, again, you're not making sober-minded decisions the whole way through.
Yeah.
And you're following rabbit holes and you're feeding into your own paranoia. And then you're not taking responsibility for your own life. We often, and it's easy to fall into this trap. So easy to be like, racism is the problem of America, and that's why my life is bad. My life is bad because capitalism or something like that. People get into like thinking outside.
Yeah.
And they don't like think about what's the immediate thing I can do to just fix my life right now.
I mean, that just reminds me of, what's that book you read recently? Is it Man's Search for Meaning or Gulag Archipelago?
The Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah, the guy who was in there and he decided to ask the question, what did I do to end up in a gulag? Or a concentration camp? Yeah. It's like, what did I do to get there? It's like, you did nothing. It was the country, it was the politics, the guy who got in power, and then he took too much power, and then blah, 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 that whole thing. And then he just grabbed some guy and threw him in the camp. So it's like, but asking himself, what did I do to get here? And then he wrote this book, did all this stuff. And actually, I don't know, did he get out of it? I don't remember.
He got out of the...
There you go.
But
then...
I think a more, like, again, the Jordan Peterson way to think about it is very direct. In that sense of, like, maybe instead of going out there and protesting and getting beat up by a cop, you could do some sit-ups. It's like, literally just start small and do something that benefits you. I think individualism gets demonized a lot because it seems so discompassionate. That's the main critique of someone like Ayn Rand, who was a hardcore individualist. Her whole thing is that it's the individual who is ultimately gonna make the world a better place and make their world a better place and do things that are better. It doesn't actually place limits on your ability to be compassionate, but it does kind of reframe things in that the most important person in the room is me, at least to me. It's like, and I should be doing things that benefit me. And then when you start on that road, it sounds, again, discompassionate, because it sounds like the way to, I'm just going to take it all for myself. But if you start to apply it intellectually, you're going, okay, it's better for me to do teamwork, it's better for me to make deals, it's better for me to have a family. And then you start getting in the way of, well, it's better for me to support my community, it's better for me to put sow seeds for trees that I'll never sit under their shade or whatever. Over time, that kind of adopts, but on the outright, it sounds greedy. Whereas on the outright, fighting against racism, fighting against racism sounds like the compassionate, moral thing to do.
Yeah.
Even though it's a waste of your time. I'll outright say this, like, there's nothing you're gonna do.
Yeah.
What you can do is actually be the best person you can be.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you feel like you're not getting anywhere in your life because people are being racist towards you, and you just focus on being the best person towards you that you can be, smart people will recognize that, and then they will lift you up. And in that way, you will have defeated your own the racism that was towards you because you rose above it. That's the only way.
Yeah.
It's not going to be solved by throwing milkshakes at people in the street, which is what they literally did a lot of the time. It doesn't work, right? It's like, again, this is lowest common denominator stuff. Just like you don't solve abortion by yelling at people in the Planned Parenthood or trying to talk a mother out of it while she's walking into the clinic. It's like, hey, guys, dial it back, you know? But that's the thing with Kelly. Instead of going, I'm in a rut, I gotta quit smoking weed, I gotta find a new career, I gotta make things work with my family, I gotta spend more time with them, I gotta be honest, I gotta find a new living situation. Let me go on Facebook, smoke some weed, and decide, oh, well, I know who's ruining the country. It's Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Who she is, let's be honest. But at the same time, it's like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go. Your answer to your life being bad is to go stand in the street and become a warrior for Trump, bro. Come on, Trump doesn't want you to be his warrior. It's like, it's the thing that's being Trump on the campaign is they'll be like, oh, I gave everything for you, Mr. President. He'll be like, good. Like, I don't. What's he gonna be like? No, you shouldn't have done that. Yeah. It's like by the time you're at that point, it's too late.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, maybe if you were Trump, you would, if I was in Trump's position, maybe I'd be like, hey, can you take that guy's phone and number down or something and, you know, talk him out of this? I don't need warriors for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's anyway.
I think overall review of the movie.
Yeah.
I think solid. Definitely it has the Andrew Callaghan like brand.
Yeah.
Like that's 100% a him movie.
He's a funny guy too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's what I liked, the balance of his comedy that he threw in there, like with the Uncle Pill guy and the party scene. Like those are very good.
Yes.
The issue I had with it being called a movie was the presentation around it, and there was no real, like we were talking when we got in there, it's like, oh, we see the big Channel 5 logo, but then about 2 seconds after you see the big Channel 5 logo on the screen, because there's all the waiting time going on, it's like 30 minutes just sitting around listening to music. Yeah. And you see this Channel 5 logo, and then you look up, and there's, oh, they're on a Mac computer, and there's the bar at the top.
There's the bar.
I'm like, are you kidding me right now? This is a desktop?
The Vogue Theater isn't very well suited to movies, to begin with. It's a performance stage.
I think that's where it's like, it was the best way to do the tour in this style, and he probably couldn't have gotten the movie in some regular theater.
I mean,
due to the content or whatever.
I understand not showing it in a Cineplex.
Yeah.
But again, like, this is a performance stage. So
either way, different. Yeah, and they had all the extra stuff and whatnot, but it was the fact that it's like, I don't know, you could have. I guarantee there are small technical things you could do to make this appear as an actual movie, because it was, okay, here's your desktop, and then I see a guy open a QuickTime file, go full screen, and hover the mouse around to wait until Andrew says, okay, we're gonna play the movie now, and then he hits play.
So there is a, like, if I was to build an excuse to steelman this a little bit, he's a YouTuber, he's got 2.2 million subscribers or whatever.
Yeah.
And his point is that the whole style is supposed to be very low budget.
Yeah.
And this whole thing, gonzo journalism in general, it's like high budget does not always serve the craft very well, because high budget is CNN.
I don't know. I think it's not necessarily high budget. It's, why are you pulling back the curtain on what you're showing? I don't know. It's a show. Give me a show.
Yeah.
Don't show me how the show is working.
I don't know what the file was called.
I mean, that's my point, though. In calling this a movie and going to a theater and making me pay $50, I've seen better content and better produced content on YouTube for free whenever I want. I could watch it 70 times in a row.
Video Game High School.
There you go.
Yeah. But
It's
again, we're it's a bit of a different idea.
But no, it's that my whole thing is very, very well done video. And he had his whole thesis stuff. The story arc was very good.
As a documentary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would have been much better presented as a documentary as opposed to this is an Andrew Callaghan movie. It's like that. It had a lot different connotation in my head.
It was also untitled when we bought the ticket.
Yeah, I know, right? But I think that's just part of the marketing. It's like Dear Kelly doesn't do anything near as good as untitled Andrew Callaghan movie and him going, we've been holding this information back for... It's part of the marketing. It was fun.
Yeah. I guess there's things about it that work, things about it that don't. Ultimately, it's a very hot day, and to sit inside of a hot theater with a bunch of other sweaty people, I'm
I like the theater.
sweating right now.
The only thing I didn't like about the theater is $13 for a can of beer.
Which is why we didn't buy any.
Insanity.
Other thing I didn't like is they didn't put on the ticket information, apparently, that they were going to have a strip show.
Yeah.
And I wish I was saying this loosely, but they brought on this other Vancouverite or Torontonian entertainer whose whole thing is that I'm naked.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring up an audience member to strip naked on the thing. And they told us not to show our genitals, but we're going to do it anyway. I was like, are we staying for the Q&A? Is this necessary?
Just fighting through.
Dear
Andrew. We
Andrew,
just left early anyways.
we enjoyed your documentary. Not so much the post-show. We wish we stuck around for the Q&A. It would have been fun to have a chance to meet and talk with you. But a bit more than we'd bargained for. Would be nice if next time you could mention so on the ticketing information. Nonetheless, we appreciated your humanitarian, humanizing look on what it's like to be on the political fringes, where these things originate from. I think we'd appreciate in the future if you'd be so inclined to see what the other side of the political spectrum's version is of that. Although I'm sure there's a lot of evidence for it already on Libs of TikTok. We are interested in seeing what else happens. Whether or not you happen to take up the campaign trail again as we walk up to another election year. Or whether your next program, or whether your next production happens to be alongside Popular Front in Myanmar. Still going on. But ultimately, I think we all enjoyed it. I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we saw it. Do you have any other thoughts about it? Or?
Next time, please color the movie.
Yeah.
None of the angles matched. Some things were super oversaturated. Some things were just, it looked like a log image.
Get a better camera, get a better audio. That was actually, the audio was bothering me too. Maybe it was just the way that the audio was done.
It was only sometimes I found, but who knows.
I had a rough time with it sometimes.
Technical aspect improvement I would enjoy.
All in all, maybe render it in UHD. Do something like that. It'd be nice to see what he could do with a stepped up budget with a larger production. Mm-hmm. I get why he did what he did, because a lot of times these like lower budget things are easier to take on the street. If we were to go in the background of him a little bit, which we didn't really do before, was that Andrew used to work with Vice.
Oh yeah, that bit.
Vice as a label was supposed to be a lot of that gonzo journalism style. It was supposed to be non-traditional. We're going into the places where classic corporate mainstream news is not going.
Yeah.
But what happened is that Vice actually got bought out by corporations, and then they made it into another liberal speaking.
Yeah.
The same thing happened with Rolling Stone, is that the people who started Rolling Stone were the Hunter S. Thompson people. They were rock and roll, they were going around, and they were, reporting on media and entertainment and culture. And then the hippies that were running the show stayed in, and they became never Trumpers, and then they became super socially motivated, and then they just fell into the same corporate trap, whether or not they were corporatists to begin with. So you had a lot of these things that start out being very grassroots, and they fall into corporate traps because you get the money, or because our hippie kind of motivations don't pan out as you continue going, because we just get sold something really easily, right? It's like, I think if you were a hippie back in those days, it's very easy for you to dislike Donald Trump. He seems, at least externally, to represent a lot of the things you hate. Right? He seems materialist. He acts posh. All these things that we don't like. I don't like them, really. I think they're funny at times. I don't think they're good qualities in a person, right? So you fall into these traps all the way, right? Popular Front is really interesting because they're very committed, at least for now, to being funded by their audience and funded by donation. But there's going to come a time where it's hard to send these journalists around the world. I wonder what they do with it, right? For now, they're doing really great stuff. I'm on board. Andrew, I want to see what you do with a bigger budget, but I'm kind of worried that the bigger budget will kill what you do.
Don't give in.
Because when people give you a bunch of money, they also be like, yeah, but don't compromise the brand. Don't compromise this investment.
Yeah, because then they can tell you what to do.
Yeah. It's like, hey, I don't make this look like it's humanizing troops.
I think that was his whole issue with the HBO thing he did.
Yeah, I would see that very much, because the HBO people want peak Andrew Callaghan, which is Callahan. I'm mixing it up with Jake Hanrahan, who runs Popular Front.
Either way, overall, good movie. Technical stuff needs work. Technical stuff and presentation.
I kind of wish we'd watched it here on YouTube.
But the actual movie itself, very good Andrew Callaghan documentary.
Yeah. As my first time exposure to what he does.
Yeah. I think that was all around a perfect example of who he is and the kind of content he makes.
I forgot to mention my bonus point, which was that Vice was actually started by some other guy named Gavin McInnes. Gavin McInnes is a Canadian. He was on Rebel News for a long time here in Canada. And he's one of the founders of the Proud Boys, who were recently branded domestic terrorists in the U.S. Because he started them as a joke, but then they got co-opted by actual white separatists and stuff like that, and it became an actual alt-right movement. Even though alt-right is another one of those air quotes terms that's hard to define.
Yeah.
And then I do want to touch on one more thing. Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA is, by the end of the Kelly's, off into the sunset thing, is that, we watch his family come together, they kind of bring him in, they put him through a program, he battles his addiction for a while, he comes to terms with the fact that he has an addiction, he starts doing responsible things, but then his addiction kind of becomes like, oh, I'm just going to blame that, instead of taking responsibility for myself. Oh, I'm not going to take actual steps to better my career because I don't want to be controlled, I don't want to be treated like a child even though I'm acting like one. And then he falls back into the trap of, instead of being there for his family, oh, I gotta go attend this Turning Point USA thing with Charlie Kirk. I don't like Charlie Kirk because and along with many other people in cultural, political, news commentary circles, because they are grifters. There's some people out there who are honestly reporting, or some people who are upfront about expressing what they do, right? So you could accuse a lot of people online of being grifters for their own thing. I've been enjoying saying I respect your hustle. I don't always respect the hustler a lot of the time. And I think when I look at people who are all talking points and just constantly pushing things, there's some individuals in those circles that I think are interesting and that I might even like. Lauren Southern and I went to the same high school. I knew her peripherally. We never
name drop
were friends, but she was on Rebel News for a long time. It's interesting, there's individuals in there who are cool, some of them also uncool. And at the end of it, it seems like Kelly's prize for staying in there the whole time is that he became a media personality for Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, which is funny because they don't even pay him. They pay him in press passes.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just stupid. Why would you take that deal? It's horrible.
Yeah.
You're being exploited, literally. I wanted to mention one last thing, is that I thought it was very interesting how Kelly saw parallels with himself and Andrew. In the sense that at the end of the day, they're both media guys now.
Did he? Did he mention that?
Not directly, but it was implied as Kelly's giving him encouragement about how you gotta push through the thing, that thing.
Oh, yes.
And it's interesting the parallels that he saw, because it's okay, now we kind of went around the same journey. We're both fighting for the truth or something, right? And now they're both media guys. Isn't that that's I want to make some kind of comment about you turn into the villain at some point. It's almost So all in all, I enjoyed it. I had a good time watching it. I thought it was interesting. I think it's a valuable documentary. I'd like to see what he does with a bigger budget. I'd like to see what he would do on the other side of the political spectrum. I want to see him widen his scope. I think this kind of news in general, if it was just a man on the street thing, I would have said no. But the fact that Andrew Callaghan took it somewhere deeper was intriguing and ultimately a rewarding experience. The guy who brought his genitals on stage, not so much. So Andrew, if you ever find yourself back in Vancouver, hit us up at the Forest Creek on youtube.com/@therealforestcreek, at the Forest Creek on Instagram and everywhere else, including Spotify, where you get your podcasts. Hopefully one day on Apple soon. You can email us, theforestcreek@gmail.com, or check out our website for www.theforestcreekweb.com. I'm Raph.
I'm Jarrod.
Sincerely, Bill Joyner. P.S. Put us in touch with Uncle Pill. Or wait, hold on a second. PPS, which I just learned recently means post-script. This is Raph in the editing room. It is sweltering. It's been a little bit longer than I thought to get this podcast edited. Part of it was, of course, it is sweltering summer, and I can only tolerate sweating in the editing room so much. But even more so because over the weekend, as I was editing this, surprising news came out that an assassination attempt has been made on former President Donald Trump. And it gave me pause as I was editing this podcast, because you can only wonder what the story would be if you were to take the same structure, the same thesis that was applied to examine the life of Kelly and how he ended up where he was, and applied it to someone like Matthew Crooks, the alleged assassin, 20 years old. According to his classmates, he'd been bullied on a practically daily basis for being an outcast for his looks. Even he was said to have some Republican affiliations, but was also a donor to the Biden campaign. Apparently, it came out that, according to his school's rifle team coach, he wasn't even that good of a shot. So you gotta wonder what that does to your confidence when you're trying to take a shot at the president. Nonetheless, they didn't manage to find any social media accounts linked to him. Apparently he had a Discord account, but I can only wonder what his story would have been to see him wander down the same path. If he had that sense of security, if he had that sense of connection that Kelly also had lost, would he have been motivated to pick up a rifle in the first place? I can only wonder, like I said. But it does give you pause that maybe if we're a little more human towards each other every now and then, if we try reaching past the yelling and grandstanding and rhetorical nonsense, I wonder how many bullets we could save. Just a thought. Anyway, stay safe, everybody. Good night.